Hi, welcome to Weekend Review. I'm Phil O'Connor, the Live Enterprise Director here at the Oklahoman. This is where we catch up on some of the headlines from the week and talk about some of the stuff we have coming for the weekend. With me today, I've got Adam Kemp from the Enterprise Desk and Don Mecoy, our business editor. And on the telephone with us, we've got Mike Sherman, the sports editor. Mike, how you doing this morning?
Doing great, guys. There's a lot going on in Oklahoma and beyond that I'm looking forward to talking about.
Well, let's get right into it, Mike. Let's talk about last night's Thunder Warriors game out on the West Coast. Didn't quite go the way we hoped, but what do we got coming back on Saturday? How's it looking for Saturday?
Well, what's interesting is the desperate team theory. You know, when there's go with the desperate team in the NBA, and last night it was clearly the Golden State Warriors. In fact, you can track this all the way back through the series. Who needed to win the most and add a little extra if they were at home? And last night, the Warriors were playing for their survival, and they got the win. On Saturday night in Oklahoma City, the desperate team, it's a little bit more complicated. I actually think it's Oklahoma City because Game 7 on the road is a mountain to climb that very few teams in the NBA history have climbed. And the teams that have done it have been legendary teams. So I think the Thunder comes home knowing that it can win at home. It's had 2 blowout victories over the Warriors at home. And also knowing that last night the Warriors just needed a little bit more.
If it goes to 7, though, just out of curiosity, we were talking a little bit earlier about what is the record of teams coming back from being down 3-1 again?
Well, there have been 9 teams that have done it in NBA history.
And isn't it like 270 or so that haven't?
232.
232. So even if we lose on Saturday, we've got a chance, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, but I think, that's true. That's true. But then you've got to start. You're asking a different question. I think who wins on the road in Game 7 versus who comes back from 3-1. Those are 2 competing equations, and the coming back from 3-1 is a lot easier to do when it's now 3-3. Winning that Game 7 on the road. Consider this: not since 1978 has an NBA team won a Game 7 on the road. The last team to do it, my Washington Bullets, beat the Seattle Supersonics in the finals. So it's hard to do. The Celtics, the great Celtics of KG, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, they couldn't do it in Los Angeles. It's a tall order to fill. The San Antonio Spurs and Tim Duncan couldn't do it. They lost to the Heat in Miami. So Oklahoma City's best odds clearly are to win Saturday night, and it'll be interesting to see, Phil. Guys, Las Vegas has favored the Warriors in every game. The Thunder has been an underdog in Vegas for every game. It'll be interesting to see what those odds are for Saturday night.
Don, what's your pick? You're going to be there Saturday night, right?
I will be there, and I like the Thunder back on their home floor. They've really played spectacularly well at home during these playoffs.
Great. Okay, on another sports matter, Sherm, we've got, as a K-State grad, I can't say that I'm sorry to see this happen. Art Brile's out at Baylor University, and Ken Starr apparently either demoted, I understand?
Yeah, he's been put into the position of chancellor, which is that job is reserved for somebody who's going to raise the university to a higher profile. Think about that.
I guess he did that.
So, yeah, he did. In ways that they had not really conceived or desired. It's funny, Phil. I mean, there's a Bill Snyder analogy here. Art Briles, in some ways, was the Bill Snyder of Baylor. He took something that he made something out of something that wasn't there.
Absolutely.
And so, but the way he did it, of course, is where they diverge. This is really going to send shockwaves not just through college football, not just through universities, but long term, it makes you start wondering about the viability of the Big 12.
Now, what do you mean there, Mike?
Well, what I mean is the Big 12 is already in an unstable position. It's the least stable of all the big conferences. I guess you could make an argument that the ACC is like that. We've been reading headlines, David Boring calling it psychologically disadvantaged. We've been hearing OU regents and leaders like Boring quibbling over expanding the Big 12. There's no real consensus. And but Baylor and TCU and OU and Texas, less so Texas lately, gave the conference some stability, some programs that were achieving, making news, competing for big stakes, and now Baylor is in shambles. It's just one less elite program now, and now all of a sudden, who fills that void? Does Texas become more powerful again? I'm not necessarily sure that's a great thing for the Big 12 if Texas is both big in stature and big in production. So Barry Trammell's got a blog about this right now on News OK, talking about the two things that Baylor getting rid of Brile today proves. One of them, which is it was a straight business decision. For the longest time, Baylor, these sexual assault allegations are not new. They're, in some cases, years old. And they were able to squash them for a very long time. But they've reached a critical point, and Baylor has decided to make a business decision. It was more beneficial from a business standpoint to get rid of Briles and risk losing its football program that has produced a shiny stadium on a hill right by the river, and maybe go back to the oblivion that Baylor football was in before Briles got there.
Do they face sanctions from the NCAA as well?
Phil, that's a great question, and it once upon a time would have not really been much of a question because the NCAA used to confine its disciplinary actions to things like eligibility, paying players, that kind of thing, and left the criminal stuff to the cops and the courts. But Penn State really, I'm not saying it's the first time it happened, but it's the most prominent time. And the sanctions they laid down on Penn State were severe. There's a lot of talk that, well, the NCAA has already said, we're going to look into this. And in that report, there's some of the common things that the NCAA gets into, like players' cars. So, yes, I do think the NCAA is going to have some penalties and sanctions for Baylor as a result of this.
Well, all this controversy has certainly caused the ground to shake in the Big 12, and we've also got issues with shaking ground in business as well with earthquake insurance in the state. Thanks. And
Segue right there.
so, Don, what is the latest on that? I understand we do have now a shrinking, I guess, of the number of companies that are providing the insurance, raising questions about the ability to pay off if there might be a major incident that has a huge premium payout.
Right. You've got the state insurance commissioner who's concerned because the marketplace for earthquake insurance, which more and more Oklahomans are seeking earthquake coverage since we've had all these earthquakes, is limited. More than half of the market is covered by just 4 companies. And that market has grown from like back in 2010 when we first started seeing some earthquakes. You had less than $10 million in premiums being paid by Oklahoma. Now you have twice that much annually being paid out. And cumulatively over the last 5 years, insurance companies have collected about $76 million in premium, and they've paid out about $4 million in claims. Part of that is due to the way earthquake insurance is formulated. It has huge deductibles. It's usually about 10% of the value of your home. So you don't really get an earthquake claim paid off unless you've got major damage. The kind of earthquakes we've had, we haven't had too many instances where you've had major damage. But you still have this concern from John Doak, the insurance commissioner, that the pool of companies is too small so that the risk is concentrated on these companies. So if we do have, say, a really major earthquake, where there's a lot of claims that are going to have to be paid. You worry about the solvency of these companies, the ability of these companies to pay off all these claims that might arise. And one of the things he's talked about doing is changing the way that the state handles rates. What companies do now is they file a rate. They say, we're going to increase our rate for roof coverage or whatever, and that rate takes place immediately, and then the state just reviews it, and the rate goes into effect. Well, he's going to change it back to the way it was in the old days, which was the rate doesn't take effect until the state has a chance to review that rate with earthquake insurance. So they would actually have control of what the rates are going to be. And now the insurance, I should also mention, the insurance industry says, listen, these insurance companies will be able to remain solvent because all this insurance is reinsured. So companies,
Yeah, but we've been down that reinsurance route before and found out that the company that was reinsuring everybody was also insolvent.
That can be an issue, yeah. And then there's, they say there's levels of reinsurance. Even those companies spread the risk. But I think what John Doak wants to see happen is he wants that at the very first level. He wants more companies writing those premiums.
I'm curious why, if you have a growing insurance market where you have more people buying a type of insurance, why are we seeing a consolidation of the number of, wouldn't that be attractive to insurers to come in and provide that insurance as opposed to a contraction of the companies that would provide it?
Well, you might think so, and I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but one of the issues could be John Doak was concerned earlier about the fact that a lot of damage claims were just being rejected out of hand. And you also had companies that were, when more and more Oklahomans were seeking earthquake insurance, they said, hey, listen, we don't cover man-made earthquakes. And I think he put an end to that as well. It said, listen, you say you cover earthquakes.
Which would cover fracking.
Well, yeah, the disposal well caused earthquakes,
yes.
From all the water we pump into the ground, which appears to be causing these earthquakes. He told them they can't do that, which almost certainly caused a lot of companies to drop out and say, we don't want to do this. Because, I mean, frankly, it really is a question. They're all about the numbers. Insurance companies are always looking at the numbers, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen in Oklahoma because it's a little bit of an outlier. This is not something that's happened in a lot of other places. We've seen it in a few other places, but not to the extent that we've seen in Oklahoma with these earthquakes that have been linked to disposal wells.
Well, there's also been an unpredictability about the oil prices in recent months, obviously, and for the first time in a while, we're sort of starting to see them head back up a little bit. We talk about the latest that we've got on that.
Well, this week, for the first time in months, we saw oil hit $50 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate, which is kind of the benchmark price that's set in Cushing, Oklahoma, where there are millions and millions of barrels of oil stored. 2 years, of course, we were at $100 a barrel. The price collapsed when the Saudis and OPEC decided that they weren't going to limit production. It fell all the way down in February of this year to $26 a barrel. And since that time, we have seen real dilemmas for energy companies in Oklahoma. We've seen several that have filed for bankruptcy, including Sandridge, which was one of our biggest energy companies. We've seen them cut back on employees. They've laid off hundreds, thousands of people have lost their jobs in the energy industry. And they've cut back on what they're spending to produce. The number of rigs that are active in the state has declined to all-time lows. But since February, the price has been rallying kind of steadily. This week it got up to $50 briefly. It fell back below before the trading closed. But that gets us to a point where the companies may be looking at bringing some of these rigs back online. They've got wells that are drilled, but they're not producing. They may start to produce these wells. Of course, there's concern that when you get all this production back in, then the price is going to drop again, which could happen. But there is some optimism now for the first time that we've seen, particularly since February, about we're getting back to a price where some of these companies can actually be profitable.
And as we reported this morning in the business section, we're seeing some upticks in the stock prices of some of our local oil companies.
Very much so.
The
big companies, Devon and Continental, since February, their stock kind of bottomed out. When the price bottomed out, we've seen prices double and triple on stock for those companies. And if you bought it back in February, you're a very happy camper.
Okay, speaking of happy campers, some people might be heading out to the lake this weekend. It is Memorial Day weekend. We have Adam Kemp here to talk a little bit about a story that we'll have on Monday Kind of an unusual one that came to us via Hawaii, if I remember correctly.
Via Hawaii, via email.
Via email. So tell us a little bit about that story, Adam.
Sure, yeah. We were contacted a couple weeks ago by a woman named Jana Hune. She's a resident of Hawaii, and she is originally from California, but she contacted us to tell us about a project she's working on. It's a kind of a counter memorial to the Vietnam veterans, or to the Vietnam Memorial in D.C. They're collecting photos to match up with every single person who died in the war, to kind of make a display. Like the wall of names, they want a wall of photos to go along with, every single person who died. So she contacted us to let us know that she's currently working on Oklahoma. Kind of needs our help in a way. She gave me a list of names for Oklahoma County and then for the state of Oklahoma of soldiers that died here, or that were from here, that died in Vietnam, that they need the pictures for.
She's on a national treasure hunt, essentially trying to find photos of every veteran who was killed in Vietnam.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story too. She went to the Wall of Names, I believe 8 years ago, and had no family members, didn't know anyone personally. It was, the war was going on when she was in high school, so it affected everyone. So she knew a few people, but she went just to see the wall, and she took away an etching of a name, got home, kind of grew curious about that etching, and went on pretty much a hunt for this one name to find the family members or the photo of this one person originally. Found out that the family had long passed since she visited. And so then she set off to just find a picture of this person, and then found out about this new memorial that they're making right now. So.
And we were lucky enough, we wanted to check and see, was it possible that maybe we had some of these pictures? So we dug into the archives.
Yeah, we ran all the names that she gave us, 58 names, ran them through our archives, and we ended up coming up with 2 pictures of 2 of the soldiers that had died, one from Choctaw and one from Oklahoma City. So.
Right. And then you were also able to talk to a family member of somebody who was able to provide a photo, and talk a little bit about what they said in terms of what it meant to them to be able to do that.
Yeah, really neat. I talked to David Sales of Chickasha. His brother died in Vietnam. He was 19 when he died. David was 17, so he was at the home growing up. Remembers coming home the day the 2 soldiers were coming out of his parents' house, telling his parents that his brother had been killed. And he was touched. He said it's very hard for him to look at the photos of his own brother sometimes, even still to this day. Will take them down off his mantle and put them in a closet just so he can get a break from them, but almost always ends up putting them back up as a memory and a memorial to his brother. So he was thrilled to be able to provide to this this new memorial that they're attempting to build. So
great. Sounds like a great story. Be sure to pick up Monday's Oklahoman to check that one out. Great stories all weekend. Don's got some great stuff in the business desk, and be sure to follow all of our Thunder coverage too. We will see you again next week. Appreciate your stopping by. See you next week.